My husband secretly gave our savings to his mistress. I made him pay. For 15 years, I believed my husband and I were building a future together. Every overtime shift I worked, every vacation we skipped, every birthday we celebrated with homemade dinners instead of expensive restaurants. I thought every sacrifice had a purpose. I believed we were saving for the dream we talked about since we were newlyweds. A beautiful home by the water where we'd spend our retirement watching sunsets together. Instead, I was unknowingly financing another woman's luxury lifestyle. By the time I discovered the truth, our entire life savings were almost gone. But here's what my husband never understood about me. He thought kindness meant weakness. He confused patience with ignorance. And he assumed that because I'd spent 15 years supporting him, I would never be capable of destroying everything he built. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. My name is Emily Carter, and this is how I made the two people who betrayed me wish they'd never met each other. I grew up in a small town outside Portland, Oregon. My parents weren't wealthy, but they taught me something far more valuable than money. My father used to say, people can lose a fortune overnight, Emily, but if they lose their integrity, they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to buy it back. I carried those words with me through every stage of life. When I met Daniel at 26, he seemed like the kind of man my father would admire. He was funny without trying too hard, responsible, hard-working, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and always offered to help neighbors shovel snow after a storm. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Our wedding wasn't extravagant. A small ceremony, close family, homemade decorations. We couldn't afford anything fancy, but we didn't care, because we believed our best days were still ahead. During the first decade of marriage, we were partners in every sense of the word. I worked as a registered nurse at a local hospital. Daniel managed operations for a regional construction company. Neither of us earned extraordinary salaries, but together we made enough to live comfortably. We created a joint savings account. Every paycheck, we each transferred 25% into that account before paying any bills. We called it the Dream Fund. It wasn't just money. It represented every shared goal we'd ever discussed. A lakeside retirement home, traveling across Europe, helping our future grandchildren pay for college. It symbolized trust. Every dollar inside that account represented a promise. Or at least, that's what I believed. Life became busier after my mother developed Alzheimer's. For nearly 4 years, I balanced 12-hour hospital shifts with taking care of her. Daniel often told friends how proud he was of me. He'd kiss my forehead before work and tell me I was the strongest woman he knew. Looking back, I wonder if those words made his lies easier to tell. Because while I was helping my mother remember who she was, my husband was quietly becoming someone I no longer recognized. The first warning signs were almost invisible. Daniel suddenly became protective of his phone. He used to leave it on the kitchen counter. Now it never left his pocket. He changed his password, started taking calls outside. If I entered the room unexpectedly, he'd lock the screen before looking up. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, he'd smile. Work's been crazy. That became his favorite answer. Late meetings, weekend conferences, emergency client dinners, construction projects out of town. There was always another explanation, and I accepted every single one. Because trust doesn't disappear overnight. It fades so slowly that you don't realize it's gone until you're standing in the dark. One Friday evening, I suggested we review our finances. It was something we'd done every 6 months since getting married. Daniel hesitated, just for a second. Then he smiled. Maybe next weekend. I've got a deadline. I didn't think much about it. Everyone gets stressed. A week later, another excuse. Then another. Eventually, months passed without us discussing money. That should have terrified me. I convinced myself I was overthinking. My best friend Rachel noticed changes before I did. One afternoon we met for coffee after my shift. She stirred her latte quietly before asking, "Can I ask you something without you getting upset?" I laughed. "When have you ever worried about upsetting me?" She sighed. "I saw Daniel downtown last Saturday." "So?" "He wasn't alone." My smile faded. "What do you mean?" "There was a woman with him." I shrugged. "Probably a coworker." Rachel looked uncomfortable. It didn't look like coworkers. I felt a sharp sting in my chest. Then I immediately pushed it away. No, Emily, no. I smiled. Daniel would never cheat. Not Daniel. Rachel reached across the table. I'm probably wrong. I nodded. You are. We changed the subject. But that conversation never left my mind. I watched Daniel asleep beside me. His breathing was calm, peaceful. I searched his face for evidence that he'd become someone else. I found nothing, which somehow made everything worse. A month later, my mother passed away peacefully. The grief hit harder than I expected. Daniel appeared to be the perfect husband. He organized the funeral, cooked dinner, handled paperwork, held my hand while I cried. Everyone praised him. Emily, you're lucky to have such an incredible husband, they'd say. I believed them. Until 2 weeks after the funeral. That's when the illusion finally cracked. It happened because of something completely ordinary. I was paying our monthly utility bills when I noticed our savings balance looked wrong. Much lower than I remembered. At first, I assumed I was mistaken. Maybe we'd paid property taxes. Maybe I'd forgotten a large expense. I opened the transaction history. My stomach tightened. There were multiple transfers I'd never seen before. $5,000, $8,000, $3,200, another $6,000. All marked as authorized online transfers. More than $60,000 had disappeared over the previous 18 months. I refreshed the page, certain there had to be a mistake. The numbers stayed exactly the same. When Daniel came home that evening, I held the printed statements in my hands. Trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, "Can you explain these withdrawals?" For the first time in 15 years, my husband looked genuinely frightened. Only for a moment. Then his expression softened. He laughed. "I forgot to tell you." Forgot? Forgot to tell me that over $60,000 had vanished? I invested it. You what? A private real estate opportunity, one of my clients. The returns are going to be incredible. Without discussing it with me? I knew you'd worry. The answer sounded rehearsed. Too smooth. Too quick. What company? I'll show you later. When? I'm exhausted tonight. Tomorrow never came. Neither did the paperwork. Every time I asked, there was another excuse. The documents were at work. His business partner had them. The accountant was updating the records. The lies kept changing. And for the first time, I stopped believing him. That night, while Daniel showered upstairs, his laptop lit up on the dining room table. A notification appeared. Not a bank alert, not a work email, just a message preview. "Last weekend was perfect. I already miss you, Vanessa." My heart stopped. The laptop wasn't locked. My hands trembled as I opened the message. Then another. Then another. Hundreds of conversations, photos, hotel reservations, weekend trips, jewelry receipts, luxury handbags, spa vacations. Every expensive gift, accompanied by the same sentence. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll transfer more money tomorrow." Transfer more money. Our money. The dream fund. The account I'd spent 15 years filling one paycheck at a time. The retirement we'd sacrificed vacations for. The future I'd postponed living for. He hadn't invested it. He'd been investing in another woman. And according to the oldest messages, their affair hadn't lasted months. It had lasted 3 years. I didn't cry. Not then. Something inside me became frighteningly calm. I quietly took screenshots of every conversation, downloaded every receipt, forwarded every bank record to a brand new email address Daniel didn't know existed. Then I closed the laptop exactly as I found it. When he came downstairs wrapped in a towel, smiling like nothing had happened, I smiled back. "Everything okay?" he asked. I looked directly into the eyes of the man I'd loved for 15 years. And for the first time in my life, I lied without feeling guilty. Everything's perfect. Because at that exact moment, my husband believed he was still in control. He had no idea that his biggest mistake wasn't stealing our savings. His biggest mistake was giving me enough evidence to destroy everything he cared about. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel. For the first time in 15 years, I looked at the man sleeping beside me and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no love, just clarity. People think revenge begins with screaming, with broken dishes, with dramatic confrontations. It doesn't. Real revenge begins with silence. Because silence gives you time to think. And thinking gives you power. So instead of confronting him, I kissed his cheek before leaving for work. "Have a good day," I said. He smiled. "You too, babe." The word babe almost made me laugh. Hours earlier he'd been texting another woman that she was the love of his life. Yet somehow, he still expected me to make his coffee every morning. The arrogance was almost impressive. That evening, I created a notebook, not on paper, on an encrypted cloud drive. Every lie, every transfer, every suspicious expense, every hotel reservation, every screenshot, every receipt, every timeline. I documented everything. As a nurse, I'd learned one important lesson. Facts matter more than emotions. No judge cares how loudly you cry. They care about evidence. So I became an investigator inside my own marriage. For 3 weeks, I acted exactly the same. I cooked dinner, watched movies with him, asked about his day, even laughed at his jokes. Meanwhile, every single day, I quietly uncovered another piece of his secret life. His mistress's name was Vanessa Brooks, single, worked at a luxury interior design firm. According to social media, she loved expensive restaurants, designer handbags, and tropical vacations. One post caught my attention. She posed in front of a white Mercedes with the caption, "Spoiled girls don't apologize for being spoiled." Daniel had commented with a heart. I stared at the screen. Had been purchased the same week our savings account lost $28,000. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Instead of reacting emotionally, I hired a forensic accountant. Not because I couldn't read bank statements. Because I wanted someone who could legally trace every dollar. When I explained the situation, the accountant leaned back in his chair. "You think it's just an affair?" "I don't know." 3 days later, he called. His voice sounded unusually serious. "You need to come in." I expected bad news. I wasn't prepared for the truth. He spread dozens of documents across the conference table. There weren't just withdrawals. He pointed towards several highlighted transactions. He opened 2 credit cards using your joint financial profile. What? He also took out a home equity line. I couldn't breathe. He forged your electronic authorization. How much? The accountant looked at me quietly. Just over $218,000. I stared at him. No, that wasn't possible. That wasn't savings anymore. That was almost everything we'd spent 15 years building. Our retirement, our emergency fund, our investments. Gone. Not because of gambling, not because of addiction, not because of medical debt. Because my husband wanted to impress another woman. Driving home, I didn't cry. I remembered my father's words. People who lose integrity spend their lives trying to buy it back. Daniel had sold his integrity remarkably cheap. Designer shoes, luxury hotels, champagne, weekend getaways. He traded a real marriage for rented excitement. That night, he handed me flowers. "Thought you deserved these." Red roses. My favorite. $16 at the grocery store. Meanwhile, he'd spent nearly $12,000 on Vanessa's birthday necklace. I almost admired the irony. The following week, I visited the attorney recommended by the accountant. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She specialized in financial fraud and high-asset divorces. She reviewed everything without interrupting. When she finally looked up, her first question surprised me. "Does he know you've discovered the affair?" "No." "Good." She smiled slightly. "Let's keep it that way." For the next hour, Sarah explained something I hadn't considered. "Emily, infidelity is painful." "I know." She tapped the stack of documents. "Can be even more expensive." She explained that using marital assets to support an affair could become a major issue during divorce proceedings. Especially with documentation. Especially with forged authorizations. Especially with deliberate concealment. For the first time since discovering everything, I felt hope. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted justice. There was a difference. Sarah gave me strict instructions. Don't argue, don't accuse him, don't reveal what you know. Let him keep believing he's winning. So that's exactly what I did. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel became even more reckless. Maybe guilt made him careless. Maybe arrogance made him stupid. Either way, he stopped hiding. One Friday evening, he claimed he had a business conference in Seattle. I smiled. Have fun. Instead of driving toward the airport, his phone's shared vehicle app, which he'd forgotten was still connected to our family account, showed his SUV heading toward a luxury resort only 40 minutes away. With Vanessa. Not Seattle, not business, just another romantic weekend, financed by my paycheck. I took screenshots. Then I turned off location sharing. Not because I was hurt, because I'd collected enough. Monday morning, something happened Daniel never expected. His company announced an internal audit. Apparently several vendors had raised concerns about unusual expense reimbursements. Daniel came home unusually nervous. They're auditing everyone's accounts. I nodded sympathetically. I'm sure everything will be fine. He forced a smile. But I noticed something. He'd barely touched his dinner. That same week, Sarah called. Emily, I've drafted everything. What do you mean? The divorce petition. She paused. And there's more. She explained that because Daniel had mixed personal affair expenses with questionable business reimbursements, his employer's audit could expose much more than marital misconduct. I hadn't reported anything. I didn't need to. His own decisions were catching up to him. A few days later, I met Vanessa. Completely by accident. Or maybe fate simply has excellent timing. She walked into a coffee shop wearing sunglasses, carrying one of the designer bags Daniel had purchased. She ordered an iced latte. When she turned around, our eyes met. She smiled politely. She had no idea who I was. To her, I was just another woman waiting for coffee. I considered confronting her. Instead, I smiled back. Because why warn someone standing in front of an avalanche? That evening, Daniel received a phone call. I watched his face lose all color. What? Long silence. I understand. Another pause. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. He hung up slowly. What happened? I asked. My boss wants to discuss some accounting discrepancies. I nodded. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. He looked terrified. For the first time, the confident liar had disappeared. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I stood by the bedroom window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. I realized something. For weeks, I'd imagined revenge as a dramatic moment. But real revenge wasn't dramatic at all. It was patient, methodical. Truth doesn't need to scream. It simply waits until lies collapse under their own weight. And Daniel's lies were beginning to collapse. The next morning, he left the house wearing his favorite navy suit. He looked back before closing the front door. I love you. I smiled warmly. I know. They were the last words I spoke to him before the entire world he'd built began falling apart. The front door closed behind Daniel, and for a long moment, I simply stood in the silent kitchen. For 15 years, that sound had meant nothing more than my husband leaving for work. This time, it sounded like the end of an era. I looked at our wedding photo hanging on the wall. 2 young people, smiling with complete faith in the future. I carefully took it down. Not because I hated those memories, because they belonged to 2 people who no longer existed. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. By the 6th missed call, he finally left a message. Emily, please call me. Something happened. I already knew. His company had suspended him, pending the outcome of the financial audit. Not because of the affair, because investigators had discovered that several expense reimbursements matched the exact weekends he had spent with Vanessa. Hotel invoices, labeled as client meetings. Restaurant bills, listed as business dinners. Rental cars billed to company projects that never existed. His own paperwork had betrayed him. I listened to the voicemail only once before deleting it. That evening, he came home looking 10 years older. His tie was missing. His shirt was wrinkled. His hands were shaking. They suspended me. I pretended to be surprised. What? Why? They think I submitted false expenses. Did you? His eyes dropped to the floor. It isn't what it looks like. Funny. That had become his favorite sentence. For the next few days, Daniel barely slept. He paced through the house, answered endless phone calls from lawyers and company investigators. Vanessa, meanwhile, had disappeared from social media. No more vacation photos, no more expensive dinners, no more smiling selfies. Then I learned why. One of the luxury boutiques Daniel had used to buy her gifts contacted him after several credit card payments failed. The gifts she'd proudly shown online weren't really hers, they belonged to the bank. A week later, Sarah called. It's time. My heart remained strangely calm. What do I need to do? Come to the office. When I arrived, divorce papers were neatly arranged across the conference table. Alongside them sat 3 thick binders. Binder 1, financial records. Binder 2, affair evidence. Binder 3, asset tracing. Every lie, every forged authorization, every hotel reservation, every luxury purchase, every transfer from our dream fund, everything. Sarah looked at me. Once he receives these, there's no going back. I signed my name without hesitation. Daniel was served the following afternoon. He called me almost immediately. Emily, what is this? I answered calmly. The truth. You've been spying on me? No. I've been paying attention. Silence. I'm sorry. 2 words. Words I'd waited years to hear. But apologies lose their value when they're offered only after someone gets caught. You didn't make one mistake, Daniel. You made hundreds. Every transfer was a choice. Every lie was a choice. Every night you came home, pretending to love me, was a choice. He started crying. Real tears. Maybe for the first time. I love you. No. I replied quietly. You loved what I provided. My loyalty, my income, my trust. But you never loved me enough to protect any of it. I ended the call. Forever. The divorce process lasted nearly 9 months. Daniel tried everything. He claimed the money had been investments. The documents proved otherwise. He claimed I knew about the gifts. The messages proved otherwise. He claimed the transfers were mutual decisions. The digital records proved otherwise. One lie after another collapsed under evidence. Sarah had been right. Facts are patient. Then came the hearing that changed everything. Because Daniel had used substantial marital assets to finance an affair, forged electronic authorizations, and concealed financial activity, the judge viewed his actions very seriously. He wasn't simply an unfaithful husband. He had violated his financial responsibilities within the marriage. The court ordered a division of the remaining assets that heavily favored me, taking into account the documented misuse of marital funds. He was also required to repay portions of the money he had diverted through future asset liquidation and settlement agreements. It wasn't enough to erase the damage, but it was justice. The internal audit eventually ended. Daniel wasn't criminally charged, but he lost his job. No construction company in the region wanted to hire someone whose integrity had become a liability. The man who once managed multi-million-dollar projects struggled to find steady work. Not because of me, because trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. And Vanessa? She stayed exactly 3 weeks after Daniel lost his income. 3 weeks. Then she packed her belongings and moved out of the luxury apartment he'd been paying for. One mutual acquaintance later told me she'd started dating another businessman within months. I wasn't surprised. People attracted by money often leave when the money disappears. Daniel had mistaken attention for love. He learned the difference too late. 6 months after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter. Not an email, a handwritten letter, from Daniel. Inside was a single photograph. Our wedding day. On the back he'd written, I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you'll remember the man I used to be, before I became someone neither of us recognized. I looked at the picture for a long time. Then I placed it back inside the envelope. Some memories deserve respect, but they don't deserve another chance. A year later, my life looked completely different. I sold the old house. Not because I had to, because every room echoed with promises that had been broken. Using the settlement and the remaining savings, I bought a smaller home near the Oregon coast. Nothing extravagant. Just a quiet place with large windows facing the ocean. Exactly the kind of peace I'd always wanted. It belonged entirely to me. I reduced my hospital hours and began volunteering at a financial education nonprofit for women rebuilding after divorce. Every week, I met people whose stories sounded painfully familiar. Hidden debts, secret affairs, financial betrayal. Many arrived feeling ashamed. I always told them the same thing: someone else's dishonesty is never proof that you were foolish for trusting. Trust is not weakness, betrayal is. One rainy afternoon, nearly 2 years after everything ended, I was walking along the beach when my phone buzzed. "Rachel, you'll never believe who I just saw." "Who?" "Daniel." "How is he?" She hesitated. "He looked different. I think life finally caught up with him." I smiled gently. "I hope he finds peace." Rachel laughed. "That's kinder than I expected." Maybe. But revenge had never truly been about ruining his life. Life had handled that on its own. My revenge was something much simpler. I survived. I healed. I built a future he no longer had access to. Sometimes people ask whether I regret not confronting him the moment I discovered the affair. The answer is no. Anger would have given him time to hide evidence. Silence gave me the truth, and the truth gave me freedom. My father was right all those years ago. Money can be earned again. Homes can be rebuilt. Careers can recover. But integrity, no amount of wealth can buy it back. Daniel lost far more than a marriage. He lost the one person who had believed in him when he had nothing. And that's a loss no bank account can ever replace. As for me, every evening, I sit on my porch, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, with a cup of coffee in my hands. The sunsets are beautiful. Not because I finally reached the dream we'd saved for, but because I reached it without the man who nearly stole my future. The dream fund didn't build the life I imagined. My courage did. And in the end, that was worth far more than every dollar he ever took.